Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining. It's Dave here from Christie Marketing, and I'm in the product marketing area, and I'm joined by Ted, who's on the product team. And so today we're going to talk about the 6 key considerations and dive into each for a successful LED video wall. I want to remind you, we are recording the presentation, so it will be available after. We also have a number of presentations on our LED products, as well as LCD products and projection and so forth, and they're all posted up on the YouTube channel, and you're welcome to check those out. There's lots to consider when planning an LED wall. It can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be, but there are lots of considerations to make sure that it goes smoothly and the customer is happy with the wall. So let's get started. Most of you know us. I just thought I'd talk about a few highlights about Christie for those who don't. We're a committed partner. We've been collaborating with a lot of well-recognized brands and industry leaders throughout many industries, and you may recognize us from the cinema side as well as the live events side, and also for video walls. We are recognized as an LED video wall product leader, and we have a team of engineers focused on LED who are striving to set some new standards. And if you've seen our microtiles LED, you can believe us when we say we are striving to provide innovative products and processes, because that product is totally unique. You can also rely on us for expert technical advice on an LED video wall project. We're there for you. I'm Dave. I manage the enterprise product marketing team at Christie, and Ted is the product marketing lead responsible for LED at Christie, the LED strategy, and he's the lead on microtiles LED as well. So here's what we have planned for the next 45 minutes or so. We want to take a quick look at the markets and just talk about where LED fits in. Ted's going to talk at a high level about the challenges and opportunities that you may face when you're planning or implementing a wall. And then we'll review each of the 6 key considerations that we think are good to know and good to think about when you're planning the wall. We'll close things off with a Q&A. You're welcome to ask questions through the chat, but we will have a Q&A at the end when we will address them all. So LED is suitable for a wide range of markets and applications, whether it's corporate, university public spaces, large-scale experiences like sports books, casinos, theme parks, control rooms for power, utility, transportation, military, government, broadcast, and others. They also work well in fixed installations for corporate, such as conference rooms, entrance lobbies, situation rooms, boardrooms, executive offices. They work well in meeting theaters, houses of worship. And finally, in the digital signage space, such as malls, convention centers, airports, subways, train stations, to name a few. And Christie has delivered a lot of LED products, hundreds of products, in fact, or projects, in fact, and we've done them in all these areas. We've got experience in all the various applications and markets that you may play in. Certainly with LED, there's a lot more flexibility than any other product that you've worked with in the past. And that flexibility, along with the ability to deal with ambient light, opens up a lot of new opportunities in terms of design, and we'll talk about that a little more as well. Ted? Ted, are you there?
Dave, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. Sorry, I had some trouble with the mic system. So, yeah, so Dave, thank you, for explaining the breadth of opportunities. LED is one of the fastest growing segments of the pro AV market. And really, the technology is applicable to many, many different applications and segments of the marketplace. And, to be honest, let's look at it from a holistic perspective. LED has some amazing advantages and benefits, and we'll talk about some of those today. And it does require a little bit more of an upfront investment compared to some other technologies like direct, LCD tiles or panels. So, what we want to make sure is that you get the most from your investment, that you really take everything into perspective, that you really address all of the concerns, the issues that may come up that may not provide the ultimate experience that you're looking for. So, I think there's just in the marketplace, it's fast growing. There's a lot of competition. There's, a lot of confusion, misleading marketing, false claims. There's a lot of things that are going on in the marketplace. So we really wanted to talk to you about some of these challenges, some of this misinformation, and really have you narrowly focus on the 6 criteria that really are the important ones to consider when buying, an LED wall. So Dave, why don't you talk a little bit about the criteria?
Sure. So we're going to start off, I'll touch on the design side. And then the other 5 considerations that Ted's going to get into include the environment, the context, image quality, reliability, serviceability, and of course project execution. So each video wall project is different, and of course speccing them out can be relatively simple to quite complex, but they're all different. I think what the main thing though that LED offers is it offers to open up some new opportunities and possibilities in terms of design. You can go out of the box, you can go out of the rectangle, and you can get really creative. So you're no longer limited in the physical location quite the way you have been with other video wall projects. And further, you're not limited very much in terms of shape and size. You can pretty well have an unlimited size wall if you want. In fact, we've got one that is on the list of largest 100 video walls in the world, and it's in Vegas. And you can also do pretty well any shape. It doesn't have to be a box. You can get really creative and deliver what the customer wants, and I think that's what's important. So rather than the product dictating what you can do, you can actually get creative. There's an opportunity to do a unique design in many scenarios, and of course that's something that you'll be discussing with the designers and customers. With respect to design, I just want to touch on 3 different angles. So the first is tiles, the second is corners and curves, and the third is unique shapes, and these are all things that you want to think about. So in terms of tiles, LED walls are of course perceived to be seamless, and they're one freeform canvas. And that's because the LED tiles themselves are designed in such a way that they touch each other without increasing the distance between the pixels between the one tile and the next, or even the module and the next. So ultimately, at the right viewing distance, they're perceived as seamless. They're very modular, they're also thin. So this is all new in terms of new possibilities for video walls. Most are less than 10 centimeters or less than 4 inches in depth. And of course, this allows you to create some unique shapes that are only limited by the size of the tile. So you need to consider a couple things when you're designing that wall. So the pixel pitch in relation to the viewing distance are key, because you've got to determine the optimal combination that puts forward the right number of pixels so that you're not overpopulating the wall with pixels, or you're not underpopulating the wall. You're wanting to make sure that there's enough pixels so that they aren't perceived individually but seen as one freeform canvas. There are some simple formulas for this, and we have those. We're glad to give them to you. We have them in a white paper that's available on our site as well, and you're welcome to take a look at that. To ensure the most design freedom, we recommend that you look for the smallest tile that supports both portrait and landscape applications. For example, a 16:9 aspect ratio tile, provided it can be turned 90 degrees, will do that. Or you might want an 8:9, and ultimately you can stack in multiple ways to address both the portrait and landscape requirements. Now, on the top right, you would have seen it on the cover as well. That's an image of a demo display that we put together for an ISE show. And what was unique about that is we had a curved wall, and it was a serpentine curve. So we had an inside curve and an outside curve, or convex and concave, I should say. And all within the same wall, and it was a fairly small wall in terms of length. I think it was about 18 to 20 feet, and we're able to do both curves. And I believe that one had a radius per tile, it was 5 degrees. So not only can you vary the tiles by X and Y, as you could always do with products, but you can also play around with the Z as I'm talking about. So you can do convex curves, you can do concave curves. Not all products can do convex very well. So it's something you're going to want to ask about. The smaller the tile, of course, the tighter the curve. So with the Microtiles LED product in the top right, that is a very small tile. It's also shown below. You can see it. It's only about 10 inches in size. And so that, given it's a small tile, that can accommodate a tighter curve. The smaller the tile, tighter the curve. And of course, most can support 3 degrees per tile if they're your standard 16:9 rectangle. The standard size product is about double the size of a microtile. Of course, our product can do 5 degrees, which is great. As a general rule, you end up with a faceted curve, kind of like a diamond, when you're doing 6 degrees or more. And then you're going to see, basically, you're going to be able to see the vertical change from one column of tiles to the next. Most can also support corners, but outside corners are a little tricky. So outside corners are difficult for most products. And in fact, standardly in the industry, you're going to see about a 15 millimeter gap on that 90-degree corner on the outside corner. Microtiles, again, because it's so small, can do about a 5 millimeter gap, of course, so that's not even perceivable provided it is designed accordingly to view at the right distance. Remember, the smaller the tile, the more flexibility that you're going to have on that Z plane. And the other area I want to talk on was, of course, shapes. So first of all, best-in-class products come with a direct mount system generally, so that the tiles can be attached to a flat surface without additional costs of a custom mount. So the Microtiles product has a fairly unique mount that if you are going to do anything other than a flat plane, it can accommodate it. However, there is some custom work that's being done. So in the top right, you can actually see a Microtiles LED curved wall that is being manufactured at our facility, or it's actually manufactured and being assembled at our facility for an installation that was taking place in London, UK. And it's a concave curve. So if you decide that you want to do a unique shape, there's a few products such as Microtiles and of course that can accommodate corners and curves very easily, and its factory mount can be customized to meet that. In most instances, you're going to need to get a special mount when you're doing unique shapes with most manufacturers. But the great thing about LED is that you can do those shapes. You can do non-standard designs. You can deliver really what the customer wants, and you can't do this with an LCD panel. So the nature of the area around the LEDs in a typical tile makes it really difficult for you to see any pixels at the proper viewing distance or gaps where the tiles join. And of course, that allows you to do some unique three-dimensional shapes. So you can do curved and square columns. You can do rectangles, see-through ones. You can do inside curved arches, stair steps, really you name it. You can do it. And you can also fly or hang the tiles quite easily, which you can't do with a lot of products. But the one thing you want to think about is you do need to look for integrated processing that will allow you to accommodate the shape and match the content to it effectively. And there are products out there that will accommodate as little as 1 pixel offset from one tile to the next. And that's, of course, going to give you the most freedom. So ultimately, you can do a lot of stuff with LED and delight the customer as well as wow the viewers. With that, we want to move on to the environment, so I'll pass things to Ted.
All right, Dave. Well, thank you so much. And, I think, LED is really unique, and especially, a leading edge product like Microtile's LED specifically, where you can unleash your artistic creativity and do, architectural pieces and really just break the planes and really have a compelling, super interesting, display, not only content, but in a physical realm. So what I want to focus in on now is, Dave mentioned, is the environment piece. And I love this picture because it talks to this new leading edge technology, LED displays in in a unique environment. This is a historical building. Actually, it's a law school. So, it's a blending of old and new. So let's talk about the environmental aspects. Next slide. All right. So the space that you're trying to fill is really, really important. And, there's a lot of aspects to this, not only the room size, but the configuration of the seating and where the audience members are located. So one of the things that Dave alluded to briefly was the, viewing distances. So the optimal viewing distance, or what Apple refers to as retina distance, is that distance from the wall. And it could be LED, it could be LCD, any technology, display technology, where your eye can no longer distinguish individual pixels. So for retina distance, it's a simple calculation. It's 8 times the pixel pitch in feet. So for example, 1.2 millimeter would be just under 10 feet, optimal viewing distance. 2.5 millimeter would be twice that. It's twice the pixel pitch, twice the viewing distance. So it goes from 10 to 20 feet. So, again, this is really, really important. But then we understand that, you may want to situate the nearest viewer. Sometimes, the most, I hate to say it, the most important viewer, like in a control room environment or a military command center, really the top brass, the military leaders, the business leaders are the ones that you want in that optimal viewing sweet spot. And maybe some of the other staff are looking at monitors and don't necessarily have to be at optimal viewing distance. So, the minimum viewing distance, if you think of a fixed install, maybe in a corporate boardroom or meeting space where you're interacting with the content or presenting, the minimum viewing distance is 3.28 times the pixel pitch in feet. So, for 1.25, it would be roughly about 4 feet. So, again, 2.5 would be twice that. So, that's an important consideration. And then our friends at Avixa have published a lot of great information regarding the furthest viewer. There's a 468 methodology for viewing distance compared to screen height. So, for example, when you're inspecting or viewing and those kinds of things, like let's say, with Microtile's LED, we just are shipping our Active 3D, which is an amazing 3D experience for visualization and team design collaboration. So where people are looking at 3D models close up, you would want to be 4 times the screen height at a maximum. But, when you're looking at information, maybe spreadsheets, doing data analytics, it might be like 6%, 6 times the screen height, or just watching, video feeds or PowerPoint type of presentations, 8 times the screen height might be satisfactory. So I really encourage you to look at the Avixa white papers and information about this. They also have some great information on ergonomic considerations. Like, we've all been to the movie, theater to see a first run movie, and the theater is packed, and you get stuck in one of the first rows, and you have to lean way back, and your neck's really at an odd angle to be able to see the full screen, and you have to look up and down and left and right. And Avixa has done a great job of helping you design a room to meet the screen height and whatnot. So that's an important consideration. But it's not only the height of the room or the depth, but it's also the width. Viewing angles are really important, and the best in class LED products have at least 160 degrees horizontal viewing angle and 140 degrees vertical. So, think about that. What you need to do is, in the room, as you're calculating the layout of the audience to the screen and the width and everything, you need to, if you're looking at the distance, the width of the room, you need to maintain it within 160 degrees or less on the right side from the far left of the screen. And conversely, when you're looking at the left side of the room, it would have to be at most 160 degrees from the far right corner of the display to keep you in that sweet spot. And, the more narrow the room, the better the visual experience. But, again, best in class products won't have much, brightness or color shift, even at those extreme angles. And then, like hanging flying displays, like if you're in a big lobby, maybe a public space, or in some kind of subway, train, station, a convention center, or mall, where you have a display hanging from the ceiling and people are walking underneath it. So, you have to consider the vertical angle. And what you want to do here is really think about the extending, right? Because that's all about the amount of time as someone's walking, underneath the display, the length of impression that you're making on them. So, taking into consideration the vertical viewing angles is really, really important, and the relation of the screen to where the audience is passing. Not only horizontally, but also if you think like in an airport concourse, right? You've got a beautiful LED screen up on a wall, and you want to lengthen the amount of time they're getting impressed by that marketing content. So the products that have broader viewing angles, like 160 instead of 140 or 120, or some even only have 100, like half, of the viewing angle, that reduces your impression time similarly by half. Let's go to the next slide. I want to keep talking about, the environment, and light is a really key factor, right? You've got to think about the highs and the lows of the room lighting and how that changes throughout the day. This is a great example. This is University of Southern California School of Communication and Journalism, and a beautiful atrium type multi-story display, but it is exposed to daylight that changes throughout the day. One thing that's been very popular recently is mini and micro LED, but the newest, the sort of early to market versions of those technologies have had a really high, a highly reflective surface on them, and this creates all kinds of glare. They're not suitable for any type of ambient light. I mean, you would literally have to have them in sort of a control room, or a meeting room that doesn't have any windows. So, that really limits your applications there with that technology. And then of course, the Earth rotates, and the light changes. So you have to think about the minimums, the maximums, and throughout the day. And the best in class LED walls have at least 1,000 nits of brightness. So when you're in a very high brightness situation, that your content isn't washed out. You can use an ambient light sensor to dynamically change the brightness of the display throughout the day. And, quite frankly, at nighttime, you want it to dim dynamically so it's not, overbearing. And also it allows you to save some power. But as you dim brightness, you also lose bit depth. So this is an important consideration. Like a control room, for example, is typically you run those at 200 nits brightness. And so you can lose 2 or 3 or 4 bits of content bit depth. And this can cause all kinds of image artifacts, banding and whatnot. And so the best in class products are calibrated at multiple levels of brightness and have image processing built in to compensate for low brightness environments. So this is a very important consideration. Something, if you are putting it into a control room or other low ambient light situation, you definitely want to consider. Next slide. And physical installation. This is, I guess, sort of what a race car driver would say: the rubber hits the road. So there's a lot of physical aspects to this. So you can scale. We have an online design tool at Christie, LED Designer. So you can use that to calculate the height, the width. You can scale it, as Dave mentioned, to a pixel map that you want to hit. You can scale it to a number of tiles wide by a number of tiles high, and all of that. Again, Avixa has some great standards to consider. Highly recommend that you reference those. There are some, I'm going to talk about power and heat in a few minutes, but there are some clearance requirements. You'll notice here that this is a wall that's going into a fully niched enclosure. There is no ventilation to the front, top or bottom, left or right. It looks very clean and beautiful, embedded into the wall. But there's the heat has to go somewhere. And if you enclose it top, bottom, left, right, as well as the back, there are some things that you need to, if you can't give it the clearance to have the convection cooling. We'll talk about the HVAC considerations, and we'll talk about remote locating of some of the key system components. But when you're thinking about the physical location, where do you want to put the put the controller and the power supplies and the other key parts of the electronics, and what kind of cables and where do you need to route them, and all of that. Our design tool provides all of those wiring maps and whatnot. And, Dave mentioned about physical structures. Our Microtiles LED and all of our Christie LED series come included with a direct mount series system, whereas many of the others in the industry require you buy an expensive third-party solution. In some cases, you may have to go with a third-party mount if you want to do something really artistic or architectural. But if you're mounting it to a fixed wall, our systems are more than capable of doing that. So, you do have to think about the load-bearing capabilities of the wall. Again, our LED configurator gives you a printout of all the system specifications, including weight, heat, and power. And so therefore you can do the calculations to verify that your wall can bear that weight. And if not, there's been times where we've had people install massive LED walls where they had to utilize a third-party mount simply because their wall wasn't structurally capable of supporting all of that weight. And then we're talking to an America's audience here. So, in the US and Canada, we really need to be mindful of people with disabilities at different levels. And, we've got the ADA and the comparable standards in Canada. So our walls at Christie meet these requirements when directly mounted. So you don't have to do any additional modification to your construction site. This saves costs and complexity, project delays, et cetera, et cetera. So those are really important considerations. And then the last thing about the physical room is sensitivity to noise, right? If you have a small enclosed room where you're trying to collaborate and have conversations, a dynamic interactive meeting, you don't want fan noise distracting you from those conversations and that collaboration. So, having a system that does passively cool is absolutely, vital. And, some LED requires active cooling. They have fans in them because they tend to overheat. They're not designed well. But I can tell you that all of Christie's products are passively cooled. They don't, unless you enclose them into a niche, then you do not need any kind of active cooling. If you enclose them on, 5 of 6 sides, then you would, need, perhaps some relief of heat from the rear. But we'll get to that in a second. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So next slide, please, Dave. All right. And as they say, content is king. So, this is a beautiful wall. It's in New York City and Manhattan on the island. And it's a beautiful, very open public space. And, they have it's a technology company. They have a lot of events and receptions here. People rent this space out. And they've really done an amazing job to build the LED technology into the architecture and then really map it with some very compelling content. So let's talk about some of those considerations. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah. And then meeting style is, one thing you have to think about. Is it more of a passive type of meeting where, there's a one presenter, kind of providing information, teaching or informing people, or is it more of an interactive meeting? Like I mentioned, our active 3D technology, is it a collaborative design situation? Another key aspect is decision making, right? This picture is absolutely important. It's an emergency response center. We're doing a lot of these emergency response centers and control rooms now with our LED product. And you absolutely have to design it, with windows and multiple content feeds and being able to switch and window and scale and all of these things, to properly respond to the crisis and make those important decisions collaboratively together. So, definitely the style, the environment aspect is very important. Next slide. And then the content itself, there's a lot of different, differences here. You may have, web pages, web feeds. It may be very technical. Like I mentioned, 3D collaboration on CAD models where you want to be able to have, very complex detailed drawings and render them in 3D dimensions. Or you may simply be doing productivity apps like Word and Excel and PowerPoint. PowerPoint's pretty easy to display well, but, things like Word and Excel, when you have black font on a mostly white background, this can be really tricky, and you need a display that is has very good resolution, that has very good uniformity in both color and brightness, to be able to, visually make that out. And there's some great Avixa, information on the choices of font size depending on your audience, situation and the kind of content. So again, I'm going to refer you to the Avixa. But productivity apps can be very difficult, especially with a predominantly white background, black text on a white background, and then video. Right, you've got all kinds of live feeds, teleconferencing. In this world of COVID, right, more and more people are calling in on different platforms like Microsoft Teams, or in a control room emergency response center. You may have dozens of live camera feeds, so you need to switch between those and be able to adjust and change layouts as is required by the format of the meeting. Next slide. I did want to mention that full motion can be tricky too. The best in class LED displays are able to display full motion video, whether it's video or some other kind of rendered content at 120 frames per second. And this provides a much smoother experience in terms of the viewing and being able to get smooth, fast motion video. Some of the things that you need to think about in terms of the specifications, and it's a technical decision, right? But what is the resolution that you need for your content? A lot of companies that I've dealt with really prefer to have the display pixel map. Brand conscious companies want it to specifically, the display to specifically map to their content resolution and to their color, to match the Pantone colors of their brands. It's absolutely critical to them. The aspect ratio. Do you want landscape or portrait in the digital signage experience is very important. Will it be on screen? Be on camera, I mean. For example, we're doing, recently we've done 2 broadcast studios, and you've seen our Christie LED products is part of the U.S. government's response to this global medical situation, the pandemic. And, the ability to not have any distinguishable artifacts on the screen. For example, the moire effect. So how you position the LED display, whether it's curved, the relationship of the screen to the content presenter or the on-screen talent, where the cameras and the lighting are. This is all many variables. So I really recommend that you bring the technology into your specific studio and play around with it. I will say that the more narrow pixel pitches are much less susceptible to moire effect. We're actually seeing a lot of studios that were early innovators with LED technology, and they got 2.5 or 3 or higher pixels. And there was a lot of moire, there was a lot of pixelization on the screen. And now they're upgrading those already, even after, a couple years, and going to, pixel pitches like 1.2 or so, because the more narrow pixel pitches are less susceptible to moire. So this makes a big difference. Again, I mentioned multiple switching and windowing for control room and emergency response centers. And then with military and security applications, content protection is really important, as it is for entertainment customers. Their content is king, it's proprietary. So making sure that it's fully compliant with the HDCP content protection, as well as using integrated fiber optic technology to maintain the integrity of the signal from the source all the way to the individual LED. This is really important considerations for these applications. And then finally, interactivity. I mentioned 3D design is one application where you would want gesture. There's some wayfinding and other digital signage applications that we've also done with touch interface. So, it's something that you need to talk to us about, and we'd love to engage with you. We have multiple different levels of capabilities that we can support you with. Next slide. All right, and so content is only as good as the image quality, and this is a great picture of Ushio manufacturing facility in Japan, in a beautiful lobby display that greets all their customers, vendors, and employees alike. Let's go to the next slide. So so many stats to consider, right? Color space, the best in class products have cinema type of color. That includes, a very, very limited number of, I think maybe only two or three products in the whole industry are able to hit P3 cinema color space, including our microtiles LED. Others are capable of the NTSC 1987 standard. Some don't even meet that. And, brightness, as I mentioned, in high brightness situations, you want at least 1,000 nits. And you want a high uniformity of both, calibrated at the factory of both color and brightness. So, for example, microtiles LED, the specification says 97% uniformity of brightness and color is actually measured greater than 98%. It's amazing. If you have a wide room, or you have some digital signage, you want to make sure that the off-axis viewing is really, really good. That there's a broad viewing angles, and that there's no color shift depending on the some of the cheaper LEDs that people are integrating onto these walls have lower viewing angles, and then huge issues with color shift as you move left to right or underneath the display. And bit depth is a huge issue as well. When you dim the color, the brightness, artifacts can occur by the correlation of brightness to bit depth. So you want to make sure there's image processing integrated in that corrects for that and adds bits back in. And then HDR10 is a newer thing that's really there's only a couple, 3 products in the industry that are really fully compliant with the HDR10 standard. And the picture on the left or probably on the right, shows you exactly the difference visually you can expect, right? So you just have to spend time and make sure the stats are right where you need them in your individual sweet spot, depending on your application. Next slide. And you've got to beware. You've got to spend the time to do the research and make sure the specifications meet your needs. But there's a lot of misinformation and over-speccing of products. You have to really be sure by bringing these displays in and having a shootout or having demo walls in your space. Again, with broadcast, this is particularly important. Your content, your environment, your cameras, your lighting. You can utilize professional grade AV tools, color meters, light meters to test, whether the specs are actually up to the published amounts. And, we actually just won 2 very large projects with leading globally recognized technology brands. And both of these companies came to our manufacturing facility in near Toronto, Canada, and used these sophisticated tools that was every bit as good as we use in our own engineering labs. And they analyzed and they said, oh my gosh, your product, is the best that we've seen in all these different criteria and really delivers on the specifications that you guys publish. So, the other thing, again, buyer beware. There's a lot of things that go haywire in this crazy fast moving LED world. One thing I've seen is, certain vendors are a bit unethical. They will bring in their, a model with the best possible ingredients, LEDs and driver ICs, etc., and we'll demo that. Oh my gosh, it looks great. And then you start negotiating on price. And unbeknownst to you, they degrade the quality of the LED and the other system components. And what you actually get is not what you were shown in the live demonstration. So you've got to make sure that there's a correlation there. So let's go to the next slide. And, when you think about it, it's amazing. A 4K wall has over almost 8.3 million LEDs, individual SMD LEDs in it. So you have to think about pixel pitch. We've talked about that, right? The viewing distance. And it's really about the LEDs themselves. You need to care about this because you want black SMD LEDs. This provides the best, viewing experience. The highest levels of contrast are also, delivered not only by the package, the LED package itself, but also the spaces, the PCB, using a black, PCB, and then using inkjet printing to solder mask and all of that. So this provides the highest level of contrast. And Christie even goes a step further. One of the reasons that we deliver such amazingly high uniformity in both color and brightness is when we build a project, we build that out of your entire project out of a single bin and batch from the same vendor, made at the same time. And we've got one customer. They're doing two 4K walls side by side. So it's almost 17 million pixels, and we're giving that to them all from a single bin and batch. And so all these ingredients matter in the visual experience that's delivered. And as Dave mentioned, seamlessness, right? If you buy a cheaper video wall, LED video wall, and it doesn't have perfect alignment physically, mechanical design, then you might as well just bought a less expensive tiled LCD, right? Their bezels are getting down now below a millimeter. So the best in class LED video walls have the direct mount systems included that allow for the X, Y, and Z adjustability for true seamlessness. And they also include software with electronic seam correction. So if there is some variance in the the alignment, you can go and mask that by either brightening or dimming individual pixels or along seam lines. So it's truly indistinguishable from the human eye. Next slide. All right, so we've got a great looking display, beautiful content. We fit your room environment. Now you've got it in operation. So how do you maintain the reliability and make sure that it has a lot of uptime? Let's talk a little bit about that. Next slide. All right. One of the things is duty cycle, and mission critical displays like control rooms or emergency response centers require 24/7. When you're in the heat of an emergency, you don't want to have to think or worry about your display. You want it at 100% runtime during that emergency. And so you look at it conversely at like some digital signage, or maybe a meeting room in a corporation, or some other different environments where it's only going to be running 16 hours a day. So you can save a little bit of money with a less robust solution if you must. But the best in class products are able to run at a 24/7 duty cycle for up to 100,000 hours. When you think about that, do the math, it's more than 11 years of operation at full brightness, all white at a 100, probably 24/7 duty cycle. So, this is a bit of misinformation because some companies just claim a lifetime of, 100,000 hours. Christie, we in the best, companies publish the stat that is more proper. Okay, this is the lifetime to half brightness, because once a display gets to half brightness, then it's time to upgrade it and swap it out. Not when the product completely fails, but our products can run up to 24/7, up to 100,000 hours until they reach half brightness. It's an amazing, amazing thing. And we have all kind of redundancy, not only in power, but video signal redundancy, video cabling redundancy, and automatic failover, fault tolerance, hot swappability, really a telecom grade solution for high availability. And then God forbid that you have, a problem during operation. You really need to think about how the product is serviced, right? A lot of products now are becoming front serviceable, but you have to make sure that 100% of the components are accessible from the front. Some companies will put on their spec sheet front serviceable, but that only means the module boards or the LEDs. To get to the internal power supplies, you have to take that entire cabinet off the wall, like a 54-inch cabinet. You have to tear it off the wall to get to the individual components inside. It can take 30 minutes or 40 minutes just to disassemble it. So better products are able to access all the components very simply, very easily, and reduce the downtime. There's other applications where rear service is a requirement. For example, sports books or digital signage where the display is elevated above the audience and it's not easily accessible, by a scissor lift or some kind of ladder device. And therefore, you're going to want, in a sports book, for example, you're going to want to be able to access and service 100% of the components from the rear. Same thing with digital signage off the back of the scaffolding that's, flying from the ceiling. You want to be able to service it 100% so you don't have to bring in a lift truck. And then also you have to think about the components. What components are located at the wall or behind the wall, and how easy is it to access those versus remotely locating some of the key system components to a service closet. And I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. Let's move on. All right, and before we get there, I want to talk about spare parts. So typically, Christie will provide a minimum of 5% spare parts of key system components, module boards, and other parts and pieces. In addition, we go the extra mile because we specifically choose LEDs from a single bin and batch. When we're making your LED wall, we set aside a certain percentage of raw LEDs from that same manufacturing lot. So it absolutely maintains uniformity when pixels are repaired. When we bring those to the service center nearest your installation, and we inventory them for you so they don't get lost. So when you send us a module board to be repaired, you can see the jig that we do that on here. We go to our own inventory of your product, your raw LEDs, and we access them. Best in class companies also go the extra mile in providing 24/7, global technical support on a hotline. We, offer, longer warranty terms. We stand by our product. For example, a 3-year standard warranty. Christie also provides extended warranties up to a total of 5 years at time of purchase. In addition, we have, global professional services that does things like, ongoing, annual maintenance plans to make sure your hardware is upgraded and all your LEDs are, repaired on an ongoing maintenance plan, as well as providing very quick emergency response if needed, even as short as a couple or 3 hours in the case of an emergency. So those kinds of services are available from our global services department. Next slide. All right, so let's talk a little bit about project execution. And I love this. This is that Ushio wall in Japan being installed. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so we talked about, installation and servicing from the front and rear. The architecture, right? Do you want the key system components like the power supplies, the controller, the processor, your sources? Do you want those at the wall, or do you prefer that they be remotely located in an easy to access service closet that disrupts the or minimizes the disruption in the room if something needs to be upgraded or updated, serviced, whatnot? So, a lot of our products have a remote architecture. This is an extremely powerful benefit, and it removes the heat and the noise and the complexity from the wall itself. You also want to make sure that the LED system that you have has the sufficient amount of hooks available so that, our popular control systems like Crestron and AMX can tap into those, and you can provide a better, easier, end user experience in the room to turn the display on, pick sources, switch content, maybe do some windowing, increase the brightness, those kinds of things in a very simple, easy to use way. And then finally, manageability, right? Does the LED wall have the SNMP traps? Can you set alerts so that when certain events happen, that you're able to respond to those quickly? Those are very, very important things that you want to think about. Next slide. And I mentioned power and heat. So here we go. Again, removing, the power supplies are a huge, heat generating source. They also make noise. They, many of them have active fans. So, putting those, locating those remotely is a really, really good idea. It again takes the heat and the noise, the complexity away from the wall. And Christie uses telecom grade remote power supplies to do that. Then you have to think about the power that you're delivering to the wall itself. Our power supplies are, most efficient when running 240 volts AC. They are derated but compatible with 120 volts. And then, you're making this trade-off. Do I want to remote the power, or, in some historical buildings, they have power, sufficiently located at the wall. And, you may just want to take advantage of that. Or it may be a historic building where you don't want to run a bunch of conduit. It's just not conducive to the environment. So, again, there are products, including, amongst Christie, that have internal power supplies. And, and then it comes to heat. We highly, highly recommend that in your design process that you refer to an HVAC professional. All of our, our LED design tool for all of our product lines gives you a design parameters sheet that includes the total amount of heat and power used, and that can be used to balance your your HVAC systems. So, in many cases on smaller walls, in meeting rooms, your current HVAC system might be capable, if you just boost its performance a little bit, of handling the heat. But when you're in a control room and you have a massive display where there's a lot of people in the room also giving off heat, you may have to adjust the HVAC capabilities to manage that heat load. So very, very key considerations. And, again, with our Christie LED products are all passively cooled. Again, buyer beware for those that require fans at the wall, because that will be a distraction. The ambient noise can be disruptive to your meeting environment. And the only consideration I would also bring up is when you have a niche, you're enclosing an LED wall on 5 of the 6 sides, so top, bottom, left, right, as well as back. In that case, then you're going to have to run some HVAC, some vent, to have the heat escape and make sure there's adequate airflow across that completely enclosed LED wall. So, system level certifications are key. A lot of the competitors out in the market, when they get these certifications, they, like UL and FCC, TUV, some others, they only get it for a single cabinet, not a system, right? An LED wall, like a microtiles 4K wall, is 20 tiles wide and 10. That's 200 tiles, right? So there's a big difference. You add those 200 tiles plus the controller, the aux holder, the power supplies, the sources. We bring all of that together and we get the UL system level certifications, and we certify it specifically for your country. So as a result, you can rest assured that you're not going to have any radio interference, that your cell phones will work in that room, even when the display is cranked up. Otherwise, a lot of times, customers have these problems, and customers, where they're surprised by the emissions of the product, the entirety of the video wall, or they have to do a site certification, which just takes time and money, and it delays the completion of the project. So, one of the things that we really pride ourselves in is, really thinking about this as not an LED wall solution, but it's a process. It's everything from, even your most artistic architectural ideas, coming up with concept, designing a solution, providing you all the specs, locating power and sources, and dealing with heat and power and all of these things, and doing a complete design review, including all of the cables. So, this is important. These are the kind of, services a best-in-class company provides, as well as installation, training, and certification of the site. Christie commissions the wall fully, and it's pixel perfect. No pixels out at time of completion. We won't let you sign the document signing off the wall, the acceptance, unless all of this has been done. And then, of course, working with us to, adjust to your timing, your budget of your project, and specifically credit terms. This is a consideration with LED, because it is a bit more of an investment compared to some other display technologies. And, there's other options besides just a single, one-time purchase. You can do leasing. This is a great option that's available from Christie for when you, want to amortize the wall over several years to defray the expense over time. And another good option is for leading edge companies that want the latest technology. It's a great way to cycle out and always keep refreshing your LED technology. For example, you could do a 3-year credit or probably leasing term. And at the completion of that 3 years, you simply just return the product used to the leasing company, and then you can go and upgrade it to the latest, most greatest technology. So these are just some things for you guys to think about. Let's go on to the next slide. All right, so those were the 6 considerations, and one of the things, again, we talked a lot about price throughout this, and price. I hear this so much when we talk to customers and integrator partners, and I know it is important. You have to hit that budget, but also I want you to really change your framework and consider it not just about price, but you need to have a solution, a complete solution that's priced right. This includes project execution, reliability and serviceability, image quality, content, the environment, as well as the design aspects. These are absolutely the 6 key considerations for successful implementation of an LED project to maximize your return on investment. Next slide, please. All right, and just a quick plug for the Christie lineup. We have a very comprehensive line that's highly differentiated at various price points. Again, with all the backing and the benefits of the Christie brand. We have our high value budgetary series called Core. You can upgrade to the Core Plus series, which adds more flexibility. It has not only internal power supplies but also remote power supplies. Pixel pitches from 1.2 all the way up to 4 millimeters. It can be serviced completely from the front or the rear. So it's a really flexible product. And, if you want a control room type of product with great image quality, then Apex is used in a lot of those types of mission critical, environments. And then finally, our flagship line. We've talked a little bit about it. And, in particular, this product is unparalleled, especially in the artistic and architectural, but in its mission critical reliability, its serviceability, it's just an amazing product. We really encourage you to take a look at our entire line. Let's go to the next slide. And, it's not just about the products, as I mentioned, it's about the complete solution and the experience. So Christie is uniquely positioned, not only with a comprehensive, LED product line, but we have all of the other workflow, the other, parts of the solution to adapt to your complete, even most challenging workflows. Everything from best-in-class image processor with the Christie Spider, the Pandora's box media server, AV over IP networking with the Terra SDVO solution, and we also bring that together with not only displays and all the other products that are all from a single vendor, but we've tested them for interoperability, compatibility. It just works. You have a single point of contact, and we will stand by our products. I guarantee you that, to make sure that you have a great experience. And it's not only just once the project is installed, but it's for the lifetime of the product. We'll help you from the design aspects, the implementation, and and the servicing, maintenance, all the way until the product is decommissioned. Next slide. And I just want to open it up now. Thank you so much for joining, and you can ask any questions. Just come off of mute, or you can ask me questions in the Q&A.
Ted, there's a few questions here. Does Christie offer an outdoor LED video wall product?
Yes, and we have done some extremely large custom outdoor LEDs, but we don't have an projects wrapped an entire very large building in LED. We don't have what we call an off-the-shelf product line, but we can, if the project is large enough, we can custom design a solution for you for outdoor. It's not our forte. It's not our primary focus, which is narrow pixel pitch, fixed indoor is what we really focus in on mostly. Is there any other questions?
There was one other one that I received. What brightness is most suitable for a control room environment?
Oh, yes, control rooms. You know, it depends, but typically 200 nits is what they're run at. So again, you know, having like with microtiles LED, you know, we add in with our you know, cinema grade integrated image processor, we add in 4 additional bits. So even at 200, you know, nits brightness, you don't have any image artifacts. So, you know, those are just, you know, a good example of what we do for our control room customers.
And the only other one that I've received is, can you give us a bit more information on system certification and the benefits?
Yes, that's a great one. And there is a bunch of information on our webpage. Let's go to the next slide. So, you know, you can go to www.christieled.com. Or if you specifically want to know about microtiles, you can go to www.microtiles.com and get more information, including there's a white paper on that very subject. So, you know, go and download it, and that information is readily available for you. Are there any other questions?
What's the range of pixel pitches for microtiles LED?
Microtiles is available today in 1.25 and 1.5 millimeter pixel pitches. And we also have on the 1.2, we have the active 3D technology, which as we've shown it publicly several times, repeatedly, we've had customers, you know, try it with the glasses on and said it is absolutely the best 3D experience that they've ever seen. So active 3D is available only on the 1.2 pitch at this point with microtiles.
I think that's all the questions we have in the queue right now. Ted?
Well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. And especially thank you, everybody, for joining us, for giving us your valuable time. And we really look forward to speaking with you. And you know, reach out to us. We want to collaborate with you on your projects. You can, you know, reach us through our website, through your Christie local salesperson, or through a plethora of social media platforms: LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. As Dave mentioned at the start, we have a bunch of content presentations that we've done, like this one today, on our LED products, microtiles, as well as all the other Christie products. So, you know, go to our YouTube channel, and there's lots of great content for you to, you know, get educated, and not only on the products, but some of the key considerations in your designs.